ways, and I want you to be comfortable with all of these phrasing. So really the only work comes in the very first problem. Okay? So here we're told that f of x is equal to the square root of x plus 2, and we're asked to find f prime of 2. So f prime of 2 is equal to the limit as h approaches 0 of f of 2 plus h minus f of 2 all over h. I know that some of you are resistant to writing out the definition each time. Okay, but if you do so, you get a point right off the bat. Okay? Plus, each time you do it, you get a better chance of memorizing it. Okay? And in the past, I found that the stronger students are the ones that write it out. Okay? So act like the stronger students. You know, do the same, show the same work they do. Okay. This gives us the limit as h approaches 0 of the square root of 2 plus h plus 2 minus the square root of x, square root of 2 plus 2. Careful, watch your parentheses on that. Okay. Before I start trying any tricks, let's simplify what we can. Okay. So this gives me the square root of 2 plus h minus the square root of 2 all over h. This should look just like your limit questions from the last chapter. All of the questions we were giving you were sort of questions that were set up to prepare you for doing limits with a purpose, right? So in the first chapter you learn how to do limits. Now we're doing limits with a purpose to find the slope of the tangent line. Okay? So that's why we sort of exposed you to all those tricks in the last chapter. What do I do here? Yeah, let's multiply by the conjugate of the numerator. This gives us the limit as h approaches 0 of, so let's see here. We FOIL this out, and we end up with 2 plus, folks, I'll be handing back your tests here. A lot of you had trouble foiling this out. So I had the suspicion that you were trying to do it in your head. Don't do it in your head. Just go off to the side and write it out. I do it in my head because if I write it out, I make a mistake. If I do it in my head, I don't. But if you're doing it in your head and you make a mistake, then you should write it out. Okay? So when I multiply my firsts together, I end up with 2 plus h. My outers and inners, they cancel. And then I'm left with minus radical 2 times radical 2, which is minus 2, all over h times the square root of 2 plus h plus the square root of 2. So now we've got the limit as h approaches 0 of h over h, square root of 2 plus h plus the square root of 2, which is equal to the limit as h approaches 0. I can now cancel out those factors of h. So we're left with just 1 over radical 2 plus h plus radical 2. Now at long last, we can evaluate this limit using direct substitution. And so we get 1 over 2 plus 0 square rooted plus the square root of 2, which gives me 1 over 2 radical 2. Questions on that? Of course, yeah. How's that? Kevin?
Final answer, would you want to multiply by root 2 over root 2?
Yeah, I don't care. My math lab may want you to do that. Somebody came up with the great suggestion of if you go into view an example and scroll down to the very bottom, you'll see how they're inputting their final answer, and that gives you a hint. If they're leaving it as an unrationalized denominator, that's fine. I have no problem with that. To me, like that's like a very old-fashioned rule. That doesn't really, it's like when people said, oh, you can, you know, at some point in a math class they said, oh, you can't have the fraction 3/2, you need to write 1 and 1/2.
Right.
Well, nobody does that anymore. It's kind of the same thing here.
Okay.
I prefer 3/2, by the way, to 1 1/2.
Me too.
Austin.
I know I probably already know this, but when you're going from the square root of 2 plus 0 plus the square root of 2,
Yeah.
how'd you get it to cancel out all the square roots?
Well, it's not so much as, so this is just a square root of 2, right? So this is, let's see here, where can I put this? So if I have 1 over the square root of 2 plus 0 plus the square root of 2, this is equal to 1 over the square root of 2 plus the square root of 2. This is 1 over 1 apple plus 1 apple is 2 square roots of 2.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you know, I add radicals every morning before breakfast, but you guys probably haven't done it in a little while, right? So please, things like that, feel free to just ask, okay? All right. So the next question says, find the slope of the tangent line of this function at x equals 2. Here's the answer. F prime of 2 is equal to 1 over 2 radical 2. It is the same question. Okay? So folks, unfortunately, sometimes in class, I'll do this example, find the derivative, find f prime of 2, then my math hub will say this, and you say, oh, those are two completely different questions. I have no idea what to do. No, they're the same question. Just a different lens for viewing the problem. All right? Let's skip C. Letter D says, find the instantaneous rate of change of this function. Okay, here we go. F prime of 2 is equal to 1 over 2 radical 2. It's the same question. The last one says, suppose f represents the position of an object at time x. Find the instantaneous velocity of that object at time x equals 2. Okay. Okay? So I want you to see that these are all the same question. They're phrased very differently, right? Okay, but they are all the same question. The only one that's not the same as the rest is where you're asked to give an equation to a tangent line. Okay. So what do we have to do here? Well, you just have to remember that the equation of the tangent line is y minus f of a equals f prime of a times x minus a. Folks, you don't necessarily have to get a tattoo of that, but you better have it down for the next test. Okay? So one way or another, you got to know what is, you got to know it. Okay? You can't write it on your hand. That doesn't count. You get a tattoo of it, you're fine. You can use that. But
Oh, really?
sure. But you can't write it down. It's got to be permanent.
Tattooed all these.
On your forehead, right? That's like the best spot.
I know all.
All right, I lost you. I thought there was a real question. All right. So here we go. Notice that here a was equal to 2. What is f of a? Well, it would just be the square root of 2 plus 2. And what was f prime of a? Well, it was, we've already calculated that many times. It's 1 over 2 radical 2, and then you just fill in the pieces. So this is y minus the square root of 2 plus 2 is equal to 1 over 2 radical 2 times x minus 2. And this is definitely one I'd like to just leave in point slope form. Questions on that? Okay. That's a bummer.